Did I already put it? Where is the options thing? Oh.
Like world-class podcasters, speakers, and leaders. I'm going to share the 7-stage journey that has taught me to speak with greater exactness and clarity. It includes understanding 3 problems invading your speech, the aha moment that immediately will improve your choice of words, and 3 thinking modifications that brought a verbal freshness and intelligence to my sentences. The first problem was my addiction to overusing dead phrases. Dead phrases are phrases and expressions that we use in such a recreational way that they have been stripped of all power.
Is it like and such? Because I'm really like trying to make less of them, and you just have to like pause, right? But yeah, I still do them.
Life. Popular dead phrases include pursue that avenue, the Achilles heel, secret sauce,
okay.
to say the least, ins and outs, spill the beans. We use dead phrases because they save us the time and trouble of hunting for more precise words. This introduces the first of 7 articulacy rules. Rule number 1, articulacy increases when you practice conscious selection with your words. If you hastily choose ready-made phrases and gum them together in your sentences like the sections of a prefabricated IKEA table, they deaden and dull your sentence. Ultimately, you want to learn how to engineer sentences that are fresh, homemade, and excavate that richness and texture that often gets buried beneath dead phrases.
Oh, he's trying really hard to sound good though.
Small surface lexicon. The term lexicon refers to your personal vocabulary. Your surface lexicon are those 500 to 1,500 words that your brain unconsciously and effortlessly defaults to when you compose sentences. The concert was amazing. It was a really good book. These words you've heard, seen, said so often, they ooze out of your mouth.
I say good and amazing a lot.
Lexicon. Your deep lexicon is made up of those 20,000 to 35,000 words you recognize but don't use. We know this because you recognize most, if not all, words that articulate speakers use. Why is it then that you struggle to think of those same words in conversation? Because those words don't register in your surface lexicon. This introduces the second rule of articulacy. Effortless articulacy is limited to the size of your surface lexicon. Now, this does not mean inflating your surface lexicon with flowery, sophisticated words. Articulate speakers recognize that you can use ordinary words and still be articulate. Think of your lexicon as a box of crayons. You can easily use a wide color palette to design a vibrant picture, or you can create something profound with just 3 colors, or choose an uncommon color to substitute for a common one. The same is true with your words. You don't always have to prostitute ordinary words down to obvious and common meanings.
Prostitute.
The third problem eroding my speaking was thought retention. When you can't retain a thought in your mind for longer than 10 seconds, your speech is like a kite, following every new wind current, never climbing high in the sky. Articulate speakers are able to hold a thought in their mind as they work to peel away the layers that lead to understanding. If you can't grip a thought in your mind, your thinking and speaking become superficial and scrambled. This is the third rule of articulacy. The longer you engage a thought, the greater depth you achieve with words. These are the 3 thorns in our tongue that prevent us from producing articulate speech. How did we come to this? Why do we battle with these issues? One day, I remember asking myself this after a particularly frustrating time of sounding juvenile and vague. I went to YouTube and researched the most articulate speakers I could find. It was then that I had an epiphany. Was my substandard speech the result of poor language inputs? I asked myself that question and wondered how much would I have to change the sources of language I expose myself to in order to influence my speech. To understand how my language was potentially being invaded by poor language sources, I began writing down each source of language that I expose myself to for more than 10 minutes a day. I rated each on a...
Okay. So YouTube, work, books, music, movies. You know, in my household, everybody was a Neanderthal, so I didn't really get any input from there. I had to like get my vocabulary from books and music, and then eventually it was like just the internet, right? And also the internet, I taught myself to speak English, and I was really, really good in English. All throughout my school career, I was like always the very best English speaker in every class, like through all of the grades. Whenever anything English related would come up, people would always look at me, ask me, and I would like baffle the teachers, right? Remember in my very last class, the last grade I was in, they were talking about something, and it came up like, what is the word for this and that, right? And I'm like almost disconnected from the class because it's so boring for me, right? It's just whatever. And I notice everybody looks at me, and I go, "What's up?" And they're like, "Yeah, they're waiting." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah." And then they ask me, what is the thing?" And I go, "Da da 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 da," and everybody's like, laughing their ass off because it was so good. And the teacher he's just like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, okay." It was so sick, man. But that is the internet, right? I exposed myself to it.
On a scale of 1 to 10 on how articulate and intelligent
Now we
I
want to go
consider each
deeper.
to be. If you want to do this for yourself, you can use this worksheet that's freely linked below. This exercise revealed that I didn't have any language inputs higher than a 5, which is approximately the level of articulacy of an average conversation. I quickly realized the fourth rule of articulacy. The quality of your speech is a product of your language environments. The books you read, videos you watch, music you listen to, etch language patterns in your mind that unconsciously are imitated
I
in your
believe that.
speech. And since most people aren't articulate or thoughtful with their words, you're constantly exposed to high doses of vague, vapid, and oftentimes vulgar language. Your surface lexicon is the size that it is because you encounter those 500 to 1,500 words daily. When we first learn language as children, we absorb 3 to 5 new words every day. By adulthood, it takes a deliberate effort to expose ourselves to new and creative word combinations. In fact, the battle is preventing the shrinking of our surface lexicon. Think of your surface lexicon as an expanding and contracting circle. Interacting with fresh word combinations, such as when you read a book, temporarily expands the radius of that circle to usher in those newfound words. If those words are not put to use, they lose their place within the circle, as its nature is to contract to include only
That's a
your
good one.
most actively used words.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is why great speakers read profusely. It is to keep that language heartbeat pulsing, expanding,
Nobody's got time
and
to
fortifying
read
their
nowadays.
surface lexicon. We can begin to improve our verbal health with the first modification I made to my speaking, the 3x5 language diet. This consists of 3 5-minute sessions for a total of 15 minutes per day focused on enriching your language. The first 5 minutes is spent reading an article
I
or
read
book
on like
chapter that's at least one level beyond your current average language
I read
inputs.
during work.
This exercise will expose
all.
you to richer language and help you solve poor thought retention, which is a symptom of constantly fracturing your attention like we do on social media with bite-sized content. If
Okay.
you don't know what material to begin with, start with this list. The second 5 minutes includes reading poetry aloud with the intent of learning rhythm and cadence. There's a misnomer that articulacy is memorizing the dictionary and vomiting flowery words. It's not. The fifth rule of articulacy is sentences sound articulate when words flow and fit into eloquent molds. If you want to learn to effortlessly fit words together in beautiful and creative ways, your speaking apparatus, your mouth, your teeth, your tongue, your jaw need to feel what it's like to say beautiful sentences. This is precisely why dead phrases are terribly difficult to prune from your speaking. You're trying to resist engaging.
Okay, but these dead phrases, I never heard this before. Pursue that avenue across the board. I know that one. The Achilles heel. Never used it like this. Like when? Why? Time will tell. Okay, I know that one. To say the least. Yep. Ins and outs. Okay. Avoid like the plague. Never used that. Low hanging fruit. Also never used it. Deep dive. I guess. Secret sauce. Spill the beans. Okay. At the end of the day. I use at the end of the day a lot. And maybe deep dive. And the rest I'm gonna use now. They're better than what I'm using, so they're not dead for me.
You're speaking. You're trying to resist engaging a pattern of muscles in your mouth that's been activated 1,000 times. It's like trying to change pre-cut lines on a cardboard box. When you tear the flap, it's expected to seamlessly follow the line, and we're trying to tear in a new direction. Recognize that you can create lines for other types of speaking. That's what reading poetry aloud accomplishes. Check out this list of poems linked below. I also have a popular poems playlist available on Spotify. The final 5 minutes is spent consciously.
Poems. There's a dead phrase list. Look at this. He's got a bunch of Google Docs. That's nice. Okay.
Attuned to the word choice of any podcast or audiobook you consume. Ignore the content, the substance of what's being said, and visualize in your mind the words being said. This will help you understand the difference between intelligence and eloquence. Intelligence is the knowledge communicated. Eloquence is how pleasing and persuasive the words sound. Here's a list of brilliant speakers who, in my opinion, have an unrivaled command of the English language. This 3x5 language formula invites the question, how do I use the creative words and phrases I encounter to enrich my speaking? I struggled with this myself and was inspired to build the ultimate tool to accelerate articulacy. This tool is called Nounce. Nounce allows you to create a word bank where you're able to log words and phrases that you want to stitch into your Surface lexicon.
Everybody be
retrieving those words from memory and use them in creative ways as you would like to in natural conversation. Nounce also has a library of popular online speakers that you can learn from. If you want to speak with the clarity of Steve Jobs or the eloquence of Martin Luther King Jr., select a speaker and you'll be guided through using their communication structures to develop clear answers automatically. Nounce was built out of a desire to give myself and the viewers of this channel a way of efficiently practicing producing clear and creative speech. Visit nounce.ai to use this tool for free, or message me on Twitter if you'd like to be part of our team in helping others build a better world with their words. The second modification will reduce your dependence on dead phrases. The reason why we aim to reduce dead phrases is not because they're overused. It's because they slip us into a state of mental anesthesia where we choose words without serious thought. Noises come up from our larynx, our speaking instrument, but our brain is not as involved as if we were selecting the words for ourselves. The only way to gain back full consciousness
it makes sense saying this
is to descend past the dead phrase and into the heart of our thought. We accomplish this by increasing the consciousness per sentence. Think of a sentence as a mold that is filled with different levels of consciousness. The longer you think, the more saturated the words and overall sentence becomes. The more familiar a word or phrase is, the less consciousness is required to use it. Think of all the phrases and words you say automatically. Because of how little thought is required to use them, they often bruise our sentence with dull, colorless blocks. An articulate sentence is one where each block is vibrant and intentional. Listeners can feel this. We increase our consciousness per sentence by, 1, being on guard against dead phrases. I've included below this video a list of the common dead phrases that frequently invade our sentences. Secondly, before you commit to responding to a question or sharing your opinion, repeat the question or topic aloud. What do I think about this topic? Why do we do this? Because that topic, or the way it was phrased, is a new or at least an unfamiliar set of words. Hearing those words spoken aloud with your own mouth begins to warm up your conscious mind. Most of us cold start our speaking engine with a few familiar phrases that we cast out into the soundscape in an attempt to find an opinion worth developing. Those phrases include, I don't know, I guess I just like, maybe I should, right? We're not thinking about what we're saying. It's not a bad answer, it's just not articulate. Remember, the first rule of articulacy. Articulacy increases when you practice conscious selection of your words. This is why pausing before speaking has long been considered a hallmark of articulate speakers. They are affording conscious thought to the sentence they're about to produce. The most unconscious part of our sentences is the beginning. The greatest communicators realize that the first few sentences, really the first few words, are where we are finding our opinion. Finding our opinion is like driving with a frosted windshield. It's hard to see the road ahead until the windshield is defrosted. Only then do you drive straight with confidence. The quickest way to begin warming up our conscious mind is to repeat the topic or question aloud. The final modification I made was learning the secrets of intellectual humility. This is the brilliant practice of using your speaking weakness to supercharge your responses. When we listen to articulate speakers, what we perceive as them being articulate is less often about the precise, eloquent words and more about how they begin their sentences in a way that illustrates that they can creatively navigate challenging situations. Watch this clip from the American film director Orson Welles.
That's a better question than I have an answer for. Honestly, it is. I don't know. I would want to think about it. I think my answer would be frivolous, and I'd like to think about it. It's a worrisome question.
Notice in this clip how candid Orson was about not having a great answer and requiring time to think. This is what makes articulate speakers so captivating, their ability to be forward with their communication needs. This is the 6th rule of articulacy. An admission of limitation is often the most articulate answer. This single realization takes some people decades to internalize. If you can...
Dude, you know what? I actually do this a lot. because I'm just practicing humility every time. Like I always say I'm stupid or I don't know about this and that. Well, it's not like the truth that I don't really know. It's just that I probably don't know more than somebody else. And then I use it as well in speech. And you know what happens in my surroundings? People think I'm stupid. And especially here, like everyone else that I meet, they actually like write you off immediately. And it's seen as a weakness and it's negative and it's bad. And like, man, this society is like just not ready for me, I swear. But I'm honest, like, there's no cap.
You can admit your limitations and be honest and forthcoming with them, you unlock a bulletproof level of confidence that most people will never possess. There are two
like with
steps
smart
that help you
people,
cultivate this
it works.
intellectual humility. One is
nobody's
identifying your main communication insecurity. These are the 8 common insecurities we encounter when speaking. I'll share mine with you. I understand that I don't think quickly and require time to process information before I compose an answer. The quality of sentence I deliver after 10 seconds of thought is far more articulate than my instantaneous answer. How do I communicate this when I speak? Once you've identified your insecurity, find the right combination of words that allows you to articulate that weakness. What I often say is some variation of, give me a moment to process that. If you're like me, you might know the weakness that you do battle with, but you lack the right words that would give you the confidence to commit to sharing that weakness. Many of us would be far more assertive in our communication if we simply had the right verbal runway for the answers that we would like to give. To help you with this, for each of those 8 speaking insecurities, I've assembled the creative phrases and responses that world-renowned communicators have used in interviews and conversations that you can use yourself. These phrases are not intended to devolve into a dead phrase. We use them only for the purpose of having alternative ways of articulating our thoughts instead of being locked into just responding.
Okay, that wasn't too bad.
If you want to be
We're gonna leave him a like. Sub? Yeah, let's sub. Always sub and like, guys. The more you read, the more sophisticated you sound. And you know what? Before we went into these videos and looking up anything about it, I already knew it's gonna be about reading. I already knew it because at some point I looked into this very, very long time ago, and then I picked up some more, like how to just unconsciously. And it always comes down to just reading, right? Because you just extend your vocabulary and expand your that one circle that an analogy he made. It was very nice. And I think I read enough books in my life, like out from school, where I actually noticed that giving me like excuse me, like giving me some sort of a boost, in my language. And thinking about it now, I'm kind of sad that I say there is no time to read, but because there is no time to read. There is no time to read. I'm reading like during work, I have to read mails and all this kind of stuff. And that's it, dude. I don't want to read more. I don't even want to read more. I mean, I would like to read more, but there is like no way. I'm doing stuff while listening to podcasts already. Like I'm multitasking already, everything, it's min-maxing 24/7. When do you find time to read? Do you make time to read? There's no way. There's too much happening. The niche, right? Okay, let's hop to the next one.
It impacts almost
Edema Loma.
everything from your ability to negotiate a 6-figure salary, to network effectively, to give moving speeches, to find
I
a
wanna
suitable
eat her
mate,
hair.
to grow on social media, to
Yum,
sell
yum,
your
yum.
products and services effectively. I'm talking about verbal communication, everything from speaking and articulation to the actual idea generation. Over the years, I've definitely developed my abilities to speak effectively and communicate my ideas, and I've had quite a few comments asking about how I got there, like how I've grown into the person I am when it comes to public speaking. And I wanted to share some of the tips that I've learned over these years. I know that there is growth, there is always room for growth, but I think these things have helped me tremendously over the years, and I want to share them with you, so let's not waste any more time. The first thing relates to studying language and books. Now, I had questions about, do I read any particular books around public speaking and so forth? And the answer is actually no. I don't think I've ever read a book that was specifically designed for, how to become a better public speaker, or, how to speak and articulate yourself in X or Y way. What I have done, though, is read extensively over my life. I'm talking about from the time that I was very young and in school. I would be up until like all hours of the night finishing the books that I had, all the way to now being an adult. So what I have been doing is spending a lot of time around language. Obviously, in this case, it's the English language, because unfortunately, that's the only one that I can speak. But yes, and so I have embedded myself within it, which means I'm going to pick up on new things, right? Each author, each book is written differently. The syntax, right? The way that they describe things, and they use language as a tool to elicit emotions from us. And the variety that you experience, if you like, with each of these books is the power in itself, right? But also, if you stumble across words that you don't recognize, I will look them up. I want to understand what this word means, which means that I'm building my vocabulary, right? That's what's happening as I interact more and more with these books. And so if you're interested in improving, your public speaking skills, then the tool of language is something that you must surround yourself with. And like I said, it doesn't have to be books that are specifically designed for how to speak publicly and so forth. Whilst if you're interested in those, go ahead. But just make sure that you're spending enough time around it. Effective storytelling is one of the biggest components about public speaking. And if you're reading books, but actually it's not even just books, it could be blog posts and articles, it could be magazines, right? It doesn't actually just have to be a book, but it is just written communication, which translates into verbal communication, because that is effectively what it's founded on, right? This is just in a different form. The next tip is actually about studying speakers. So here things become a little bit more deliberate. Now it's not just about generally immersing yourself in language, but it's actually picking out the things that you find appealing or that you actually shy away from when you hear people speak publicly, or whether it's something on like YouTube and you're wondering what it is about this person and the way they're speaking that is able to entice me or is able to grab my attention and keep it, or why I like listening to them for extended periods of time, why I like the way that they tell stories. So this is where you actually watch people and take notes, and I try to do this in any situation that I'm in, especially if I'm watching someone live, right? I recently, well, not that recently now actually, but I did attend an SRE event, which happened over 2 days, and there was lots of speeches, right, from different people in the industry. And I actually wrote down, as much as I was writing down the notes about like the technologies and the frameworks and all these things, when I had a speaker that really captured me, I would write that down in the notes about why that was, right? Like, there was one lady who used like a lot of humor and she used memes, but she also had a picture of her dog up there and she spoke a little bit about her dog, so she personalized herself. It wasn't just a random person there speaking about, whatever in the SRE world or monitoring and alerting. She made a connection with us, right? And then, like I said, the humor, we were laughing, people were engaged, like what's gonna be next on the slide. She also didn't use loads of words on these slides, and I know this is such a basic thing, but when people are presenting, a lot of people still do this, right? I've done it before as well, but the fact that there wasn't too much going on meant that I could focus on her, but there was enough to keep me kind of guided. There was enough structure for the flow to work effectively. And on the opposite end, I remember being in a talk and thinking, this is actually boring. And I don't mean to say that in a rude way, because I'm not saying that I'm the best talker or I'm the best public speaker, but I was bored and I looked around and I wasn't the only person who was bored. And trust me, it's not easy to speak publicly, and I don't want to downplay this, but I want to be honest, because if we're honest, we can pick apart why that is and then, embed that in our own process. And there were things that I noticed, like the pace, like I said, things on the screen, there was loads and loads of writing, or, the person actually was taking a long time to get to what we were interested in. And that was something else that I noted in my notes, which was get to the main feature as quickly as you can to engage your audience. And so I actually wrote that down, right? Like that I wasn't quite engaged with the speaker and it was really hard to concentrate because of X, Y, Z. So next I actually want to take a step back and talk about idea generation. Basically the foundation of the things that you're going to talk about, whether it be in a situation like this, like I said, YouTube, or a speech on the main stage, or actually maybe in networking events, or if it's going to be in a one-to-one with a potential employer. How do you kind of craft and structure things in a way that makes sense? And one thing that I have found has been very, very helpful to me is the fact that I have engaged with a multitude of disciplines effectively, right? I love the sciences, I love the natural sciences, I study geography, but I also love art. I have read books in all of these domains, right? Even physics. As you engage with all of these, you start to find links. And one really powerful thing that people use in their speeches is examples, right? And they thread things together. And it's easier to thread things and pull from examples that may resonate with you and the next person, when you're engaging with multiple disciplines. It's like people who understand psychology often can wield that in their speeches to make you feel a kind of way, or to link something they're talking talking about in finances and the financial world with, your day-to-day and the emotions that you feel when you open up your bank account and so forth. And things start to become a lot more interesting and therefore a lot more engaging. So that's the tip I have for this. Don't be afraid to interact with information from a number of sources. And this doesn't just have to be books. It can be documentaries, right? It can be YouTube videos. It can be books, but it can also be magazines. It can also be the talks you go to. Surround yourself with a wealth of information and from a multitude of sources. The next thing is actually about pace and not being in a rush. Often, in order to sound like we're smart or we just can think of things off the fly, we start to speak very quickly, perhaps in response to what somebody has asked us, or even just on stage. We're kind of rushing through things. And that comes across, whether we like it or not, as a lack of confidence sometimes, right? Like, why are you rushing? Like, why are you not comfortable enough to take your time, per se, and, take us through this journey, whatever that is? And, there are some exceptions, some people who are still very good public speakers, but they speak incredibly fast or incredibly slow. What it really comes down to is finding your pace, the pace that you're most comfortable with, that allows you to articulate your ideas and your words in an effective way without it being too chaotic effectively, or so slow that it's like, are you finished? Or the next one is obvious, but the scales may not be. So I've been doing YouTube for, I think, 4.5 years now, just over. Right, so I have been practicing my ability to speak publicly for 4.5 years on this platform alone. But it didn't just start there. I also did public speaking in school. Like when I was the head girl of our sixth form, we had to give speeches. Now, they weren't always the best, but that got me into the rhythm and into practicing my ability to speak publicly. And, that has only grown and improved over time. But I would say that it's not just these big grand things where you're like in front of a big audience or you're here on YouTube. It's also about your ability to speak up in situations like at work when you're having a group discussion, and ability to, raise your hand or put forward ideas right there and then in front of everyone. That is speaking publicly, right? And you'll practice and you'll get used to articulating again your ideas and hopefully communicating them in an effective way, right? It could be even if you're in school and you're a student, raising your hand to answer questions. I remember in uni, there was almost like people were paralyzed sometimes by when a question was asked by the professor. Nobody wanted to speak. I don't know if it was fear. I don't know what it was. And sometimes I felt like I was doing the most because my hand was always going up. But I was genuinely interested in engaging and speaking. And I realized that my own ability to articulate ideas just improved, right? It improved each time that I put my hand up. And also what improves is your confidence, because you realize, whoa, if I do say this thing, the world didn't end. Everyone didn't laugh at me. It wasn't that bad. But then if you do want to scale up, then you do have to think about where you can put yourself in situations where there is a larger audience, right? Can you apply for speaking events within your particular sector? If you work in marketing, if you work in tech, right? If you work in nursing, other events and conferences that are being held where you can apply to speak, where you can put together something and go forward and speak on it. Or can you start a YouTube channel, something like this, or TikTok if you want something on a smaller scale, or Instagram, where you will be speaking and expected to articulate things, from time to time, whether it's every week you post, sometimes people post every day on things like TikTok. You'll get used to it and you'll get comfortable with speaking. Now, another thing that has helped me is actually being able to watch myself back. Now, if you just do a speech or you articulate yourself in some sort of situation, but you have no way to capture it, then it's almost lost to the moment, right? And that's not to say that that's necessarily always bad.
She reminds me a lot
but
about...
it's very hard to kind of, look back and think, oh, I did this and that, because the moment is past. And so you're kind of grabbing at bits of information that you can remember from how you delivered that speech. Whereas if you record yourself, you have the time to stop, pause, look, oh, actually, that could have been better. Oh, I noticed that I was really, really fast there. This is something that I did a few months back, where basically being on TikTok meant that I had really, really sped up the way that I was speaking, like the pace of my speech was really fast, and I didn't like it. But I noticed it because I recorded myself, and I could sense that, okay, that is something that I need to work on.
Because you don't have time.
Down to my normal pace, right? The pace that I'm most
You gotta speed it up for the Zoomers.
Record yourself, right? You don't necessarily even have to put it up, but if you can record yourself,
6 seconds, you're out.
It and look back and find your faults and the things that you did really well, lean into those, and maybe cross-reference that with the information that you have and the notes that you've been taking on the different people that you've heard speak and the things that you liked about it. The next tip is kind of a hack, but it's basically speaking about things that you're knowledgeable about or that you actually have an interest in, because then things are going to flow out of your head a lot easier than if you are speaking on things that you have very little information on, or that you're just not really that engaged with, right? Sometimes you can tell somebody that really doesn't want to be up there speaking about that thing, right? And you're like, and you can feel it, and I can feel it, and everyone's looking like, why are we here, right? And so if you can navigate or put yourself in situations where you're speaking about things that you're interested in, that will really help, and it will help with confidence, right? You'll feel more confident and you'll exude that confidence because you're sure, you're at least a lot more sure than you would have been in that topic and in that subject. But this also leads into the next thing I want to talk about, which is preparation. And this is the whole things that you're knowledgeable about in a bit more depth, right? If you've done your background work and you've made some notes about the topic that you want to talk about, even if it's not scripted word for word, and you know what examples that you may want to draw on from your own life, that is going to leave you feeling a lot more confident and prepared for, this public speech that you're about to give, or the video that you're about to record, or the interview that you're about to go into. This is something that's very powerful in interviews. And it's something that I think has helped me, get very quickly to 6 figures in tech, despite not having a degree in tech or anything like that, is because I almost over prepare for a lot of these interviews, right? And I can tell the difference when I do prepare and over prepare and when I don't. and how I navigate and conduct myself in those interviews, how I articulate my ideas and my understanding of their problem and how I can solve it. And as the stakes of the situation go up, it's one thing if you're trying to just talking to someone on a one-to-one networking event, although it can very much help if you understand who's going to be at the event or what it's roughly about, so you can discuss those things. But obviously, the stakes get a bit higher if you're going to be in front of an audience of 1,000 people, or if you're going to be negotiating with a top tech firm for, a job that you want. One of the last things I want to talk about is actually leaning into your unfair advantages. So one of mine happens to be my voice. Apparently, I'm just saying that's what people have said to me, right? And so it means that I can start to use my voice in a way that I know will probably help with my public speaking, right? Will help with the way people engage with me and the fact that they like listening to me. But for other people are really quite funny. And whilst I think humor can definitely to an extent be learned, there's some people who are just almost innately funny without really trying. And when they bring that to their speech, everyone's laughing, they love it, right? And so what is your unfair advantage, right? What is it? And sometimes it is just how knowledgeable you are on a particular subject, which means when you get up and stand there, you can talk and you can riff on these points for a long time, or actually the opposite way, in a very concise way, which is actually, I didn't have this on my list, but now that it's just come to my mind, it's actually not about how long you can talk for, but how concise you can make some of your points. And there's this saying and then there's this quote effectively that is about when you really know a subject, you can speak about it in a really brief way, right? Like you can get the point across really quickly, versus when you don't, that's when you often start to waffle. So linking back to that is, can you deliver the message in a concise way? Anyway, the final point I want to make is it's a process. It's a skill like any other, which means you can iterate on it, you'll get better, right? I'm not finished. There are lots of things I would like to improve about the way that I speak and the way that I deliver information, but I'm proud of where I've come from, right? Like going from point A to point B where I am now, and whatever the road ahead looks like. So don't just think that it's like, well, I'm just not born with it. This is not that thing, right? This is a skill like any other.
Can I improve that skill, dude? Is it too late? If it's something that you can learn, then we can maybe learn it, but it's gonna be hard. Man, if I could listen to myself speak when I was like 13 or so, I would speak like really, really, really fast. And with such a heavy accent, I would speak so fast that people would make fun of me. That was fucking nuts. And at some point, I got self-conscious of it. It was like 13, 14 years old or something. 15 maybe. Very late. Because I only had Neanderthals in my family, so... It's all about your foundation. That gives you your baseline, and then you have to work with this. So I think we gotten pretty far in that in that speech department. But still, like I listen back to some stuff I'm talking about, and as she says, though, if you can't explain it simply, you probably don't know about anything, or you probably don't know about whatever topic it is. So I probably don't know about anything.
And therefore, if you practice, if you engage, if you study, if you analyze, you'll be able to get better. Anyway, that's it. I've kind of been putting off doing this video for a while. Like I said, I was like, who am I to talk about public speaking? But if the things that I've said today can help anybody and help them feel more confident when they are speaking, then it's all right. I'll see you in the next video.
Leave a like.
You once said the most dangerous.
This is how you become more articulate. Oh, this one is with Jordan. But yeah, so the main points I can take away from what she said is it is a skill, and you just have to work on it. You have to surround yourself with it and just learn it. I would really want to know what she's talking about with her voice. And she said that's one of her strengths. What do you mean your voice is your strength? Is it because your voice is nice and that's why people want to listen to you regardless of how stupid you sound about a certain topic? Not in the way you say the things, but of whatever you are saying? Or what is it? What does she mean? She didn't really elaborate. I'd like to know more about that. Alright, let's see. Jordan B. Peterson clips. I already sub and like.
Dangerous person is one who is articulate. What would you recommend to a one who wants to learn to speak in a more articulate manner?
Well, articulate is an interesting word, because if your joints are articulated, and that means you can do things with them because they're articulated, right? They're not one solid, vague mass. They're differentiated. And someone who's graceful is articulated. and compelling because they're articulated. And speech is a form of articulation in that manner because the act of speech itself is extremely complicated. It's a very complicated motor activity, right? It's a very complicated action to dance with your tongue, let's say. And it is definitely the case that there is no more exceptional form of the capacity to be dangerous than to be articulate. And one of the things that really shocks me, and part of the reason that my son and I and our coworkers developed this essay app, is that young men in particular are never taught this. It's like, well, why be literate? Well, do you want to be competent and dangerous, or do you want to be vague and useless? Because those are your options. And I don't care what your job is. It doesn't matter what you end up doing. You know, if you're a plumber, great respect for plumbers, by the way, and you're articulate, you can negotiate with your clients. You can introduce your coworkers. You can make a case for your employees. You can advertise your services. You can think through your problems. You're firing on all cylinders. You know, our whole culture is based on the idea of the supremacy of the word. Our whole culture is based on the idea that it is the word itself that extracts habitable order from chaos and possibility. And the reason our culture is predicated on that is because it's a deep truth. And to the degree that our culture actually embodies that, it works. So it's a great thing to be articulate. And it would be so lovely if our educators were wise enough to communicate this appropriately to young men who are striving forward, and to let them know in no uncertain terms that if they want to make themselves into forces to be contended with, that there's no surer route to that than an exceptional poetic literacy. Now, it's not like young people don't have an intuition of this. There are reasons they admire rap musicians, for example, who are often extraordinarily articulate in their performance and their capacity for spontaneous poetic utterance. And certainly,
that's true.
The greatest people I've met, including great warriors, you might say, are great in no small part because they're articulate. I know a former special services, special operations soldier, Jocko Willink. Some of you might know about Jocko.
Jocko is insane.
Online following, and
wakes
he's
up
about
4 in the morning.
4 feet wide and about 3 feet thick, and he's one tough son of a bitch. I'll tell you, you don't want to mess with him, and he knows perfectly well and is very capable of articulating the fact that his success as a eminent warrior is in no small part dependent on his ability to communicate. Because he could communicate well, he could listen to the men who were under his command. Because he was articulate, he could explain to his superiors the situation on the ground. Because he was articulate, he could make a case that the men under his command who were deserving would be promoted. Because he could think in an articulate manner, he could plan strategically and not lose battles. Okay, so that's the case for being articulate. And what's the alternative? You want to be inarticulate? You want to say and like and and pause and stumble? And,
I feel so
be unable
bad.
to formulate a strategy,
I feel so stupid.
be unable to elucidate a vision, be unable to compel and convince other people, to entice them with your articulated vision of what might be. You want the opposite of that? Why would you want that? You would choose awkwardness over grace? It's preposterous. It's beyond foolish. And I cannot understand for the life of me why this case isn't made in a compelling manner, particularly to young men. And I know it's not being articulated to young men because they're dropping out of the educational realm in droves. And it's unbelievably sad. So, how do you become articulate?
Thank you.
Well, by paying attention to what you say.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good start. And what do I mean by that? I mean pay attention to what you say. So you can think of this as an analogy. So imagine that you're trying to walk across a swamp, and the swamp is murky, but you know there's a path. You know there's a path of stone under the water, but it twists and moves. And if you stay on the path, you won't drown. The crocodiles in the swamp won't devour you. And as you walk forward, you can feel with your next step where the stone might be. And then you feel it's solid, then you take that step, and then you do the same thing with your foot again. You search and you find out what's solid, and you step on it, and you move forward in that manner. That's what you do with your words. It's the same thing. You feel, and you feel, is this the right word? Is the fact that I'm uttering it putting me together and making me intact and stronger, or is it tearing me apart and making me dissolute and weak? And you can learn to do that. I learned this in part from reading Carl Rogers, who's a great clinician, and Rogers believed that the integration of language and action was a necessary precondition for operation as an effective clinician, that you had to align what you said with who you were, and that one of the things that your clients would be evaluating you for was that capability. And you might say that someone with that capability manifests themselves as genuine and trustworthy. And more than that, I would say also as compelling and interesting, although that can be gamed. But the entire combination that emerges out of the domain of articulate
See how
communication
self-critical
can be
he
gamed.
is?
It's
No, with not only himself,
not easily.
but like also
You
his
feel your
message.
way. I noticed 40 years ago when I started thinking these things through that
Like it.
much of what I said actually made me feel weak. I didn't know why exactly, but sometimes some of the things I said didn't have that effect. They weren't accompanied by a sense of shame, let's say. They weren't accompanied with a sense of vulnerability. They were solid. And at the beginning, that was probably only about 5% of what I said. The rest of it was instrumental. You know, it was language I was using to get my way in the manner that Tammy described when she introduced me tonight. There was an arrogance in my use of language that had to do with the desire to attain proximal victories, right? To appear smart, let's say, to win an argument, something like that. A very different idea than merely feeling my way along to see what word was appropriate for what moment. But you can learn to do that. And you can listen to yourself, and you can stop humming and hawing and using like and you know and fillers. And you can take the time necessary to
That's so me.
craft your words carefully. And you can practice merely saying what you believe to be true. And you can read. And you can read great writers. And you can write. And you can write about what you think about the problems that obsess you. And you can become articulate as a consequence. And there'll be nothing about that that isn't the adventure of your life. And so it's a moral endeavor in some real sense. Right? To become articulate is to become the master of your own tongue. And to become properly articulate is to make the word divine. And to treat it in that manner. And to decide whether or not you believe that it is the case that the divine word creates the order that's habitable and good. And if you do believe that, well, if you don't believe that, then what do you believe? And if you do believe that, well, go all in. See what happens. See what happens if you become articulate. I'll give you one more small example. Tammy touched on this in the introduction too. She said she'd learned to pause. You can pause. It's a prayerful pause in some sense. When you're in a discussion with someone, you can ask yourself, they might present you with a question or a conundrum or a proposition, and instead of responding with what you know to be right, so to speak, you could just ask yourself, what do I actually think about that? But it has to be a real question. It has to be the kind of question that you'd pose to someone you didn't know. It has to be a question predicated on the idea that you might not know who you are and that you could ask. And so someone will present you with a question, you think, okay, what do I think about that? But you have to want to know the answer, and then the answer will make itself known, because that's how thought works, and then you can just communicate that answer. And if you do that, you'll be interesting right away. You'll be interesting to the person that you're talking to. And if they do that to you, they'll be interesting too. And then if you both do that, you'll have an interesting conversation. And if you have an interesting conversation, you'll both grow as a consequence. And that's actually the pathway to growth. And you just wait. You can wait. You can open yourself up to the possibility that what needs to be said will make itself manifest, if that's what you are striving for, if that's what you're asking for. And then you can merely communicate that. You have to abandon instrumentality to do that. And so one of the reasons Joe Rogan is so successful, by the way, is that that's what Joe does. He just asks questions. He isn't trying to get something from his guests. He's not trying to become more famous. He doesn't need any more money. There's no instrumental utilization of language in his discourse. He's just a humble lunkhead, you know, in the most profound sense, who would like to know more than he knows, and who asks all the stupid questions he can think up. And it turns out that he's actually very, very smart and very well educated now, after talking to hundreds and hundreds of people and listening. And so the stupid questions he asks aren't stupid, and they're questions that are shared by virtually everyone who's listening. And he takes his listeners along on this process of exploratory endeavor, and it's the pathway to success. And
I love Joe Rogan to death, dude. I love him so much. We have an issue though. We cannot listen to any Joe Rogan podcast anymore because we get DMCA right away. Mayan Singh. Yo, bro, what's up? Hello. Let's listen to the rest of the video here.
the
only
same
half
thing
a
can be
minute.
true of your life. The pathway to success is much, if you're guided by the spirit of honest inquiry and every word you say is reflective of what you believe to be the truth, then the pathway that you walk on is a golden pathway to success. And I know that. I know that to be true.
Scheiman. Yo, thanks for following. So, again, Jordan Peters, absolute giga chat. He makes a pause, like, it's part of his speech. And I try to make pause whenever I need to, not over-exaggerating or anything, but trying to just, think and really think. And when I do a pause, I'm just thinking. And most of the time, it's just trying to think of a word or of a string of words that convey my emotions, basically. However, when I'm recording something and I'm like speaking off the top of my head, for example, yesterday or when was it? Sunday, I recorded the vlog, and I'm watching it back and cutting it. Oh my god, the amount of ums and ams and arms and the filler words are insane. There is a feature in CapCut where I would have the premium version, which I do not have, you can just press the button and it will like cut your video and just remove all the ums and arms and all the pauses. It's crazy. It's actually crazy. People don't have to, like, if you're editing something in post, there's no reason for you to speak eloquently at all. The program is just making it for you. And this is just the beginning of technology. It's gonna be crazy. Where was I going with this? Yeah, whatever. It don't matter. I just want to be, just more eloquently for myself, I suppose. But the way Peterson describes it is something that you have to like choose to be dangerous. I understand it. I get it. And then he says, "Oh, you can be useless. You can have these filler words." Oh my god, that resonates with me. That hurts me so much. It hurts me so much. I'm trying. So his answer on to how was to think about what you say. And it is actually really hard to think and speak at the same time. Unless you already know what you want to say. And that comes back to what Adamana said, where if you don't know about a certain topic, then you can't really explain it in simple terms. So you basically do not know what you're talking about. Therefore, you're gonna have to stop and think, right? So how much do we really know? How much do I really know? I guess it always depends on what you're talking about. I don't try to see a fault here in my... There's nothing that I can, fault myself. Because after all, we're just exploring, trying to grow, looking up things that I have never looked up before, and obviously we're not gonna know about it, right? But it's just speech, like the basic. Just basic. Not saying ooms and arms. It's, I think, a good step for sure. I like how it says to be dangerous and the plumber analogy and everything. It's not even an analogy, dude. It is actually just straight up facts. Whatever you are, like whoever you are, if you can speak, you can get somewhere. So yeah, it was a great one. Never disappointing. Jordan. East. Alright, let's check this one. By Shimon Davis.
Talk. But since you clicked on this video, I'm gonna give you a little bit something more than that. I'm gonna give you a few tips and exercises or two to help you speak more clearly and a little bit more comfortably. I'll make a separate video about speaking confidently, but I got you. So first and foremost,
How old is he?
The reason why you want to slow down is because you want to take out all those unnecessary filler words. That doesn't mean don't ever use filler words, but the unnecessary ones. Like when after every sentence you're and like it's too much. Sometimes I like to use and sometimes I like to use like to add just a sense of character to my sentences, to my words, and to make conversation seem not so robotic. Because you have people that get on camera and they give you tips like how to be this and do this and do this and do this, and there's a cut to make all those sentences sound perfect. There's no
It's all a cut. Yep.
It sounds robotic.
Yep.
You don't really get to relate to it, so I don't like to do that. But what I do is I'm very conscious of what I'm saying. I like to speak at a rate in which I can kind of watch what I'm saying and also allow my brain to keep up with my mouth, because people don't realize, but talking is a very complex motor skill. It's not just blabbing out stuff. It's a lot that goes into it. Your mind is working in many different ways. So I could have used and like when I just paused right there, and that's what most people do. They use those words to give themselves time to think, but when you could literally just slow down, think about what you're gonna say, think about how you're gonna say it, and how you want to communicate, and it's really very simple. The reason why most people get pressured to do things is because they're kind of afraid of silence. It's the same way, you know, a guitar player or most amateur guitar players, when they're doing a solo or they're playing a guitar, they try to do everything fast. They don't want to make any silence, but real people will tell you, real musicians will tell you that the soul is in the silence. That guitar player that just shreds out a bunch of notes, yeah, it sounds cool, yes, it's impressive, but then there's that guitar player that take that one note and just ring it out. And it's in the silence, it's in that pace, it's in that cadence, it's in that rhythm where all the things go. It's just like a drummer, you know? Somebody could sit there and yeah, that's cool. And there's gonna be moments when you need to do that. But then you got the dynamics.
Now he's just flexing.
You know what I'm saying? There's different scenarios that call for different things. So when you're speaking about something that's very unnecessary, you can skip past those things. You can speak a little more quicker. But when you really want to get into details, you want to paint pictures, and you really want to convey a message, that's when you slow down. So for example, I was just headed down the alleyway, and you know, I busted right, busted left, and then I found myself in this place, right? I said all of that, but you don't really feel it. Now, I was just walking down this alleyway, and then I took a right, and then I took a left, and all of a sudden I got this weary energy about this thing. And I mean, the birds were chirping, and the cars were passing by, but then all of a sudden, this one car pulled up, all black, tinted window. You get what I'm saying? You can skip past all the unnecessary details because you don't really want the person listening to focus on those things. So that's kind of my philosophy on the whole speaking fast, speaking slow.
Interesting.
Taking out the filler words and all that good stuff. And then another thing that will help you speak more clearly is to know what you're talking about. And I'm not talking about concepts. I'm talking about
we got that one.
We'll get into concepts in another video. But a lot of people like to use words that they're not familiar with, all these big words, trying to, enhance vocabulary, which is cool. But many intelligent people, they use simple words to describe advanced situations. And you want to use things that you're more familiar with, things that you're more familiar with pronouncing. And one thing many people won't tell you is when you want
stick to your guns.
The quality of your vocabulary is not about the words in which you use in terms of how big they are, but how specific they are. So somebody be like, I feel bad. Okay, that sounds like something a kid would say. What type of bad? I feel angry. I feel upset. I feel devastated. You know what I mean? Or that car looks bad. How does it look bad? That car is destroyed. You know what I'm saying? There's different words that describe specific things, and a way to sound, a little bit better in your speech, or to be a little bit more clear in the way you communicate, is to be specific. That's the same reason why most people have respect for those people that are straightforward. They tell you how it is instead of beating around the bush. Well, the mind kind of picks up speech the same way. But another thing, and I struggle with this too. I'm from the South. I have a little accent. Some words I kind of mix together, like ask, right? Asking a question. Most of the people down there say ask. like axe or ask. It's all merged together. So I seen this, and I've tried this too. You can take this pen, you can put it in between your teeth. You can say alphabet, you can say sentences, you can talk, you can do whatever with this pen in between your teeth, and it will make you over-articulate your words to the point where you don't have this, you will start to do this. So you take a pen, right?
Okay.
A, B, C, D, E, F,
F, G,
H, I, J,
L, M,
L, M,
N, O, P.
Not Elemento. It's not A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, Elemento.
A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N,
right?
Q, R, S, T, U, V,
X,
Y, Z.
You'll notice there's going to be a lot of tension in your tongue, right? So when you start to do this, you want to do it a few times a day, you want to do it 5 minutes out of your day, whatever. You're going to notice all that tension in your tongue. Well, eventually, tongue's going to get a little stronger, it's going to get a little bit more flexible, and because you're going to get used to over-articulating your words without the pen, you're going to speak a little bit more clearly. And to wrap
That's a cool exercise.
Everything you learn, and when you're trying to
really
learn
practical.
something and improve, you have to analyze yourself. You have to watch film. So record yourself talking. Record yourself talking for 5 minutes. Record yourself doing these exercises. Record yourself doing all these things and analyze yourself. Look at the way you look. Look at the way you're talking. The way your hands moving. Some people have their hands down there, talk like relaxed.
That's really good exercise.
With your hands, you know what I'm saying? So
I think I'm gonna talk the rest of the stream. We're gonna talk like this.
When I look into the camera, I
JK.
too much, or you know, the camera is representing the person. If I'm looking at somebody,
But I see what he's saying.
I'm blinking a bunch at the camera. I'm probably blinking a bunch, you know, when I'm talking to a person, and I can see myself judging myself because I keep stumbling over these words. And I'm thinking, well, these words sound better, and I don't sound good. You can't judge yourself, man. You just gotta talk freely, but it all comes from practice. And it's not just you practicing talking; it's you practicing in the way in which you want to talk. So there's this little saying I was thinking about the other day. I was like, you should practice in the manner in which you want to perform. If I want to talk fast, why would I practice slow? Now, let me pause that. You practice slow to get a foundation of what you're saying, and then you progressively increase your speed, right? Because you want to do something right. You don't want to do it wrong and practice that because you're going to get bad habits. Let's say I want to talk fast, and it's like blah, 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 right? So the next week it need to be blah, 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 blah. And the next week, blah, 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 blah. And it just keeps going on and on and on and on. But you have to practice in which you want, in the manner in which you want to perform. So if you want to talk slow, practice it slow. If you want to talk fast, you know, slowly progress till you get faster. But I think the best speakers are the ones that speak in a very dynamic way. Just like I was mentioning earlier, they know when to slow down, they know when to speed up, they know when to get a little bit loud, they know when to get a little bit quiet. They have that good dynamic. The same thing with a dynamic driver. We hate being in cars, or we hate being around people that drive too slow. Maybe we don't like being around people that drive too fast. But that person who knows when to cruise so you can see the scenery, that person who knows to tear out of there like a bat out of hell when they need to, that person who can hit the curves just right, that person who can hold the car, those are the dynamic drivers. You know, they know how to smoothly press on the brakes. It's not, it's just like, man, this dude know what he's doing. So it's the same thing with conversation, man. So when I get back to the crib, bro, I got a video. It's gonna be pretty good about speaking and improving. I want to do that one in my layer. You know what I'm saying? Got the vibe going and all that stuff. But I got y'all, man. So if there's something else you need any help with, just comment, and I will try my best to help y'all out. And you know, with speech or anything. And if it's something that I'm missing or I'm not pointing out, or there's something that I do that you kind of want to replicate in a way, or if I inspired you in any type of way, whether it's speech, charisma, whatever the case may be, just let me know, and I'll, you know, try to get that information to you. But it's always a pleasure talking to you. I love you. I appreciate you. And get on that speaking, man. In 10 minutes, I want to see that you done did all these steps, you done practice, and you done recorded yourself, you analyzing it, you see what you messed up on. I want to see you critique yourself in the comments. I want to see, you know, I speak a little bit too fast, so I have a problem with stuttering, and this is what I'm gonna do. I need some solutions to these issues, because we gotta get better every day. That's the goal, and that's what we're gonna keep going. So, like I said, man, I love y'all. Y'all take care. Always a pleasure talking to y'all. Talk to you soon.
Cool. What a cool guy, dude. Oops, almost thumbs down. There was a lot of good stuff that he said. I'm definitely gonna check out his channel at some point. I am definitely going to check out his channel afterwards. Trying to what was he saying? Exactly, no, what was it? See, I need more vocabulary, honestly. Emphasis. Yeah. I think my biggest problem is I live in Germany and I don't even speak German that much, but it's still like my main language. And then I have like this Neanderthal language that I don't even like. And then I have English, which I can't really pinpoint. Like, am I good in speaking English? Am I not? It is, after all, the language that I'm using every day, daily, mostly. And still, I just feel stupid sometimes using it. Not because of the language, but because I don't know the words. And then I learned Spanish for a bunch, and when somebody is talking Spanish, I understand like most of it, but I can't really speak it myself. Same goes for all Slavic languages, Russian. I understand it when people are talking, but I can't really speak it myself. I do, however, I know the alphabet. What's the word for it? Cyrillic? I know that one. I taught it myself. I taught it to myself when I was very little. Nobody showed me. Nobody did. And now I can read it. I can read it slowly, but I can read it all. Like, if you give me a book, I would take forever to read it all, but I would be able to finish it. Yeah. It's just practice in the way you want to perform. Okay.